takazowana ma-sanctions akaunzwa nema-western countries takange tapa chisungo kuti aiwa tavakuda ivhu redu ridzokere kuvanhu vanabata nevhu ravo.
We want those sanctions to be lifted, in fact, yesterday.
To speak with one voice on the issue of Zimbabwe.
It is very important. Unity is very important.
In the advent of the new dispensation, President Mnangagwa reiterated the long ZANU-PF standing stance on land. While responding to questions on the World Economic Forum and other platforms, the president said, even though the imposers of sanctions wish to reverse the land reform, that was not going to happen.
They are still of the opinion that the land reform which we carried out was not necessary, which we disagree. It was necessary because the land reform is premised on equalizing the situation in the country, where 70% of our land was in the hands of about 6,000 farmers from Britain, and 30% of our land was in the hands of 80 million Zimbabweans. But that is now behind us. We've done our land reform program where 363,000 families have now been settled on land, and we are saying to them the land issue is behind us.
The land reform is behind us. We are only consolidating. Our agriculture must now be modernized, must now be mechanized, must now make sure much of our agriculture is under irrigation. Kana mvura ikanaya tinokohwa kakura, kana ikasonaya tinenge tine enough hectarage iri under irrigation tigowana zvechikafu chinofidha nyika ino nokuwana zvakare strategic reserve land.
It is our right to own our land, and the President, His Excellency President Mnangagwa, has been very eloquent on this matter. He has called for engagement and re-engagement with the West, and they have not responded positively. All they need, all they want, is to pursue their regime change agenda, and they have the opposition in place.
The unwavering stance on land by the Second Republic infuriated the American neo-colonialists. On 4 March 2019, as has been the norm for the past 2 decades, the American President Donald Trump extended sanctions by another year. These sanctions continue to hurt ordinary Zimbabweans in many spheres of their lives.
Ikanti-ke nxa sivele sikhangele abantu jikelele ukuthi izijeziso zenotho ezafakwa yi-America eZimbabwe zibathinta njani. Imithi kasayithole kahle ngoba iZimbabwe ngokwayo ayingeke izimele yodwa yilizwe. Yonke imizamo ezamayo ukuthi izuze ama-lines of credit ayiwazuzi.
A country's transport system is a key enabler in the entire economy. The American neo-colonialists knew this when they put embargoes on the national railways of Zimbabwe.
Prior to 2002, as NRZ, we used to move 12 million tons of cargo a year. And we've seen this figure decline to as low as 2.6 million tons that was moved in 2009. And we believe sanctions played a significant contributory factor towards this decline. Part of the challenges came from our inability to establish letters of credit. Prior to 2002, when we ever wanted to procure spares, because most of the spares that we need to maintain our equipment and our infrastructure is imported, we used to establish letters of credit, and then on that basis we then get supplies. With sanctions, it was no longer possible to have LCs.
Over the years, the machinery around here has been dilapidating due to challenges we've had on space availability.
The sanctions law passed by the American Congress, United States Congress, stipulated that any financial institutions, global financial institutions, like the IMF, in which they are a shareholder, and in which also Zimbabwe is a shareholder, the World Bank, in which America is a shareholder, and also Zimbabwe is a shareholder, the African Development Bank, although called African, comes under the dictates of the United States of America. The law provided that Zimbabwe should not gain any credit, no financial access should be given to Zimbabwe from any of those institutions, IMF, World Bank, and the African Development Bank.
Due to America's control of international financial institutions, Zimbabwe was denied international capital.
Because of sanctions, the country has no access to international capital, especially to the traditional markets of Europe and the United States. That was closed, and it has been closed for the past 20 years. That has been the most negative impact on our country and on our economy. No access to capital. So Zimbabwe is growing and managing on its own resources. In other words, lifting itself by its own bootstraps. That is the situation Zimbabwe finds itself in.
Some financial institutions that did business with Zimbabwe were fined heavily by the American Office of Foreign Asset Control, OFAC. One such institution is the Standard Chartered Bank that was fined 1.1 billion American dollars, and now Standard Chartered is closing all its operations in Zimbabwe. Besides imposing heavy fines, the American government intercepts money destined for Zimbabwe.
The sanctions gone to the extent that even payments from offshore customers, sometimes some of our exporters arrange that we be paid by their own buyers offshore. These are intercepted. Only last week, for example, when the payment that was coming through for $137,000 US, that was again intercepted by a corresponding bank for one of our local banks. And it's been held, and we're now having to find a way of how that money can still be paid. And these interruptions affect us greatly, because this is money that by now we could have paid for spares or for equipment that we need.
Sanctioning, companies, all the major, state enterprises are under sanctions. Our products are under sanctions. Only recently, some fictitious allegations have been made against our diamond industry, claiming that our diamonds are produced through forced labor. What nonsense! We have never had a situation where anybody is forced to work in Zimbabwe. Zimbabweans are hardworking. They love working, they want to be employed, and the very same people who say there's a high degree of unemployment in Zimbabwe, then turn around and say there is forced labor in Zimbabwe. What a contradiction. If there are so many people who want to be employed, why have forced labor?
Despite all that, the Americans continue to deny there are sanctions on Zimbabwean economy.
It's not true. Zimbabwe has not been able to access a cent from the capital markets of Europe and the United States since 20 years ago. It's a fact. Before that, Zimbabwe was able annually to gain access to $3-4 billion United States dollars from capital markets of Europe and the United States. That door was closed by the sanctions. You need also to understand that some of the sanctions are, should we say, written, and some are de facto, meaning they will say anything that there are no sanctions, but the reality is that they don't trade or they don't do business with Zimbabwe.
Prior to 2002, we had a lot of support from the original equipment manufacturers, these people who supplied us the locomotives, the signaling equipment and so on. Whilst they do not say so openly, but we noticed that after 2002, we're no longer getting the technical support, we're no longer getting the training that they would afford to our staff, we're no longer getting the updates in terms of maintenance instructions, maintenance practices. And this again resulted in loss of technical capacity and also failure to keep up to date with the latest technology from some of these manufacturers. Again, this contributed to the poor state of our equipment and our infrastructure.
It is very important. Unity is very important. It is very important. Unity is very important.
The NRZ is not the only key entity in Zimbabwe that was affected by the sanctions. Numerous sanctioned entities have crumbled under the weight of these illegal sanctions.
CSC is a monster. It can't be done overnight. It hasn't worked for a long time. There's a lot of refurbishment to do. Some assets are in good condition. The foundations, the infrastructure is pretty good. But the heart of the operation, the engine rooms, there is not one compressor working amongst the whole of the CSC. They're outdated, they need to be replaced.
One key entity is the Zimbabwe Iron and Steel Company, better known as Zisco Steel. Zisco used to export products to South African customers in US dollars, which is the international medium of exchange. The invoicing was done by the Minerals Marketing Corporation of Zimbabwe, MMCZ. However, on 25 July 2008, the President of America issued an executive order blocking properties of Zisco and MMCZ. The British also applied the same sanctions on Zimbabwe. Due to this executive order, the following happened. Some Zisco funds and MMCZ funds in US dollars were frozen as of 25 July 2008. Any US dollar receipts which were deposited in Zisco's US dollar accounts were frozen. No payments could be effected through Zisco's US dollar accounts. MMCZ could not invoice Zisco's exports as MMCZ was also specified by the executive order. What you must note is that internationally, the US dollar and the euro are the best convertible currencies. The South African rand is not easily convertible, hence Zisco could not switch to rands. Moreover, South African suppliers and customers who comply with the American, European and British restrictions stopped doing business with Zisco. Most software and hardware originate from the West, like technology needed to run the bar rod mill comes from Sweden. This suddenly became unavailable. The simple result, Zisco collapsed. Another serious negative effect caused by the sanctions on Zimbabwe is the killing of the country's image on the international market.
Mainly on the banking side, with misconceptions about the country.
They consider Zimbabwe a pariah state. That is a fact.
Because of perceptions of country risk, which I believe the sanctions are also contributing to. Facilities are very expensive on the market, and it has been a challenge for us as NRZ to structure those facilities where we can buy replacement equipment. The cost of money is always an issue, whilst we're still discussing, but there's no doubt that the perceptions of country risk, no matter where we source the money from, will always come in terms of the cost of money, because they always put a premium on that cost of money that is based on the perceived country risk.
The assault on the image of Zimbabwe by both the international and local private press has been relentless and littered with fake news.
The main challenge is the negative press and people not investigating correctly, fake news. There's been that negative press goes internationally, not just locally, and that's our biggest challenge is instead of something positive what we're doing, people are trying to find the negatives of what we're doing, and that hurts, not just us, but other investment coming into the country. They see the negative press, which is not true, fake news, as some other president likes to call it, and that's really hurt us, is people not understanding the story. We've taken on a big challenge here. We knew it was a big challenge. This company hasn't worked for almost 2 decades. That hasn't scared us. We knew that when we took it on, but the issues, the negative issues in the press was not what we were expecting, and that's caused us a lot of problems, both mostly for some of my management and my family, because we get a lot of bad issues in social media and the printed press, which are not true.
This kind of sanction is imposed by Zimbabweans on Zimbabwe and enhances further the negative perception on the country.
We as people of Lupane, we are being affected by these sanctions. I will talk mainly of what we have here. We have furniture. We wish there were investors. Because of this negative publicity, they don't come here. We are being told there is violence in the country, people are abducted, we don't experience that. It can be 1 or 2 cases. It's not all over the country. We are just in a peaceful district, peaceful Zimbabwe.
The neo-colonialists hide behind human rights so as to justify their illegal sanctions.
America will always be America. How on earth, if it is true that we have human rights abuse in Zimbabwe, will they build an embassy in a 7-hectare piece of land or even more and invest millions constructing that embassy and making sure that all their staff are staying in a country where the human rights abuse is? That's an excuse. And if you want to talk about real human rights abuse, go to America. Look at what their police are doing to black Americans, our brothers and sisters who are in America. If you want to know human rights abuse, go to Britain. Look at the behavior of their police in the streets. We haven't seen that here. There are so many countries where people are being abused, people are being harassed by the state, and they are not talking about it because they are white people.
But the amazing thing is that the very same people who are now talking about human rights never raised human rights issues. When human rights were being violated, the left, right and center by the Smith regime and the allies.
Even the ambassador of America is moving around freely in our country, interfering in our politics because we are a free country, we are a democratic country and we respect human rights. So that is just an excuse that is coming from the imposer of the sanctions, who is now giving excuses just to justify an evil action that they have taken against our country.
It is very important. Unity is very important. Unity is very important. Unity is very important.
An old adage says, one of the greatest tricks the devil has ever played is to convince the world he does not exist. This is the story of the evil American sanctions. The Americans would insist the sanctions are targeted at few individuals.
This is not really a party matter. It affects every citizen. These illegal sanctions affect every citizen.
Sanctions are actually a form of economic warfare that came to destroy our economy in Zimbabwe. Yes, they have said that they are targeted sanctions. But if indeed there were targeted sanctions, I think they missed the target. But the people who have the problem are the people at the grassroots, who will fail to be financially independent, who will fail to be included in financial activities.
This idea that sanctions are of no effect because they are only target a few individuals. If they are of no effect, why are they having sanctions against us? Why not leave them?
Kwedu isusu kughetto zvedu tinoimba tichiti zvoni vanhu vakaziva kuti hausi muroi vanokudheerera vanokutsemera kuti tsemtse. And I think America is just playing the big brother issue. They know we are not like them. We don't go to Iraq, we don't go kill our own citizens. So it's high time to do our role.
The effects of the so-called targeted sanctions are spread across every value chain. Targeting one key institution can have ripple effects on the whole system. For example, targeting NRZ can also affect Zisco Steel, Wange Colliery, and even the ordinary Zimbabwean traveler.
Railways offers affordable transport, cost-effective transportation, but because of our lack of capacity, we see that our customers are struggling to compete in terms of export competitiveness on export markets.
At the end of the day, sanctions are killing ordinary Zimbabweans.
It is misleading and unfair for America to say that the sanctions are targeted. Let's look at the whole list of individuals that they claim to be targeted by these sanctions and ask ourselves, is there any one of them who have been sleeping without eating? Is there any one of them who is not traveling in a car? Is there any one of them who doesn't have a family where each and every child in that family is going to school? The issue of targeting individuals is just a shame on the face of America because the people, the ordinary people, particularly young people, are suffering because of these sanctions.
Katarra Jera document rawo ravanoshandisa ivo ravakanyora rakaunza masanctions inototaura sanctions to Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe means the Zimbabweans, and we are the Zimbabweans. And those who are said to be listed are not even affected by these sanctions. Why? It's very clear, taking into a look to the former president. Pavakarwara vakatonobatsirwa kunze, and vabatsirwa kunze zvichira kuti vane capacity yekutoflya vachitobuda vachienda zvisingakwanisike kuita nemwana wese muZimbabwe. Isusu tikarwara nhasi unoenda kupare, waenda kupare wasvika ikoko you find kuti kusina mishonga, at the end of the day you go back home, you die.
Zimbabwe yanga iri bread basket yeAfrica yatingati nyika yaikwanisa kuzvimiririra yega tisati taiserwa masanctions. Asi nenyaya yemasanctions we have been turned into a donor dependent nation. Hatichakwanisi kuti tikwanise kuproduce zvinhu zvedu zvinotengwawo kunze.
Masanctions apa ekuti iswevo vachikula kupinga tukachiwe kuti tusanine impurity yesukambo ibingi vachikula tava konzi pekutegwa vajane imirimo kamboka kuti emakhambani mingi tashikonje phekuthi kwantithi abantu imisebenzi.
Mina ngisizalwane seZimbabwe ndoda ngihlala ebubi. Ama-sanctions akhona eZimbabwe ngibona asithwala senzima kakhulu. Ikakhulu endaweni engihlala kiyo ebubi. Ebubi indawo okugejwa khona igolide. Kodwa ngenxa yama-sanctions ilizwe lenelisi ukuthi lidinge equipment edingakala ukuthi abantu basebenze kuhle. Aba-ontanga bethu bagcina bengena emigodini bengela izinto zokusebenzisa equipment eqondileyo. Ngaleso sizathu abanye badilikelwa emigodi. Le golide okufanele balikhiphe phansi libuye ku-fiscus aligcina lingasaphuma ngoba basebenzisa izindlela ezingayisizo ezingaletha inzuzo eningi.
Ama-sanctions asilimazile ngwabona imigwaqo yethu ukuthi injani, akula equipment yokuthi silungise imigwaqo, izibhedlela. Angithi mina immortality rate is very high. Kungenxa yokuthi izibhedlela zethu they lack medication. So in that regard our people are dying, but they are even dying of hunger. There is no food because we don't have the equipment for farming.
Hapana mudzimai wemuZimbabwe usina kuvhakachirwa nemasanctions ayamba make. Whether uri MDC, uri ZANU PF, uri party, kana uri kuchechi ipi, wakasvikirwa nechipuka ichi chinonzi ma-illegal sanctions.
Mamai kuti vete ma-projects avo ma-sanctions amukukoneja nokuti zvinhu zvose zvinobva kule zvinobva kuzhe kweZimbabwe. Chinowe ma-sanctions undowi unhu unovuraya.
Ngendlela yangikhona osekusenzakala ngakhona ama-sanctions asesiza ngobuningi bawo sesize siswele ukuthi sibambe ngaphi.
iZimbabwe ninyika inoted Rokozi party but izinto ziyazenzeni zitiri kujana muZimbabwe ngatichikwanisi kuti tizuzwe kunze kwenyika kambo kama sanctions.
Zvakare mvura chaiyo yekubikisa yacho vanhu vakuchera mvura ine tsvina nekuti hurumende haikwanisi kudrina mabroholes anokwana kana kuchenesa mvura haikwanisi. Saka mailiga usaziva kuti masanctions arikukodzera izvozvo. Zvakare chingwa kana tichiti bikai chingwa changa chisikabikwi nemadzimai chakushayikwa chingwa. Ziva kuti mailiga sanctions wangani wedu wachikudya chingwa mumba haichafuti. Ziva kuti mailiga sanctions.
Not only have sanctions affected prices of commodities and service delivery, they have also affected the availability of basic commodities. One of the biggest effects of the economic sanctions in Zimbabwe is the rise in unemployment rate.
We also have seen our staff numbers decline from over 10,000 staff or 10,000 employees that we used to employ to the current 4,300. We were forced to do this because of the declining revenue base, and we had a combination of having to retrain some of the employees and also having to freeze recruitment so that we could manage the numbers.
Over the years also, the operations here have been scaled down to meet the given workloads. Years back, we used to have a skilled worker manning every machine which you see in the background. But now, some machines are unmanned and others are due to the scaling down of operations which you have had.
When you talk of unemployment, we're talking about young people, because young people are the ones with energy and they're able to work in our industries.
In fact, to be able to afford the wage bill, we should have reduced further, maybe to below 3,000. But our cost structure, our operational structure is such that we cannot go beyond certain numbers because some of our costs are fixed. Our infrastructure, whether we move 1 train or 10 trains, there's a certain basic minimum maintenance that we have to do, and we have to carry that stuff. So this has translated to us accumulating salary arrears because we've not been able to pay the staff their full wages due to the declining revenue base, and we've accumulated over 100 million salary arrears. So I'd say that at the end of the day, the employees who are perhaps part of the citizenship of Zimbabwe are the ones who bore the brunt of the
Sanctions.